So earlier, our speaker said that it's hard for politicians to be brave, and I suppose that's true. But it's in my experience, it's really easy for politicians to be stupid. And one of the examples I'll give you is my neighboring mayor from Hampstead, which is a municipality of 7,000 people, has banned smoking completely, like in all public spaces. I mean, I just don't know how that's going to happen. So I've reached out to the poor people of Hampstead and said they're welcome anytime to come over and have a smoke with me. So the city actually we put together a committee of experts and a couple of people from our executive committee, one who's in charge of youth and social development, and the other one that's in charge of economic development. And there were people from, public health and criminologists, researchers from universities, people from youth centers and rehab centers and so on. So our memoir was basically based on their input and their expertise. And the bottom line in our approach to this is we'll be taking a public health approach to it rather than public security. And it will probably be dealt with the same way as cigarettes are, except in Hampstead, of course. So you can't smoke, obviously in restaurants and in inside buildings, except for your own home. And parks, you won't be able to smoke near kids' playgrounds, and so on. And one of the things we want to do is stop stigmatizing youth, especially, or try to get rid of this idea that it's illegal and that if you're smoking or using cannabis, that you're basically a loser and a stoner. So, so we want to take an education, public health education approach. And because, the bottom line is people are already smoking it. I mean, it's happening. So we're not going to ignore that that's reality today, and you smell it everywhere in our city. But I guess the concern is with youth. And there was a study done on Quebec Health in 2014 and 15, and it found that about 40% of the population between 15 and 24 had consumed it in the last year. And I suspect some of those were probably lying, but anyway, afraid their parents would find out. But so the point is, you can't put this genie back in the bottle. Like it's here and it's going to be with us. And so the question is, how are we going to deal with it? So on the monetary side, obviously, we're asking for a third of the taxes. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities has suggested that, so it's not just Montreal. And the reason we want that money is because for education purposes, to especially when it comes to youth, and also in policing. So we're going to have to get new equipment for testing drivers, for example, and we're going to have to do a lot of training of police officers on what the new law is and how they're going to enforce it. And also in terms of fire prevention, first responders, that's going to require resources as well. One of my concerns in my borough is already we have a big problem with insalubrité. I don't know what that is in English. Unsanitary living conditions. So, if people are going to be growing their own, what does that mean for the neighbors because it's a densely populated area, and in terms of risks of fire or roofs collapsing, that's one of my concerns. And we're not allowed to add taxes to it, so we will be asking the federal and provincial governments for a chunk or a cut. And it's estimated that the one-time cost to the City of Montreal will be between about 875,000 and $1 million plus, and recurrent costs between 4.7 million and 9.3 million per year. So that includes hiring 23 to 54 people, mostly in the police service. Also, driving while impaired. I'm sure that this has been talked about already at this conference. I haven't been here the entire time, but as you know, like THC stays in your system longer. So if you're pulled over and they do a blood test and find THC, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're impaired, is from my understanding. So, we would like some kind of reliable test that's sort of rubber stamped by Health Canada, and that is reliable and accurate and applied across the board in the country. And in terms of distribution, in February, 6 companies said they had signed agreements with the SAQ. Now, the SAQ, for those of you who aren't from here, is where we get our wine and beer and spirits and so on, SAC, the SAQ. Everybody knows what the SAQ is. But now they're going to call it, the one for cannabis will be the SQC, which isn't as catchy, I find. We have to come up with a better name. The SQC, like it doesn't roll off the tongue. So, and imagine if you've already consumed what that was. So we have to come up with a better, so that's one thing I would like is better name. No, just kidding. So we have 6 companies that have signed agreements to supply at least 62,000 kilos of cannabis during the first year that cannabis is legalized. And the city this week, and we are responsible for choosing the locations of these outlets. We've announced the first 4, but majority of sales, I think, has been said here already, will be online. So the criteria for choosing the locations is that selling in locations has to be accessible by public transport and active transportation. Now, I don't know if our government, being Projet Montréal, did that to encourage the use of public transportation and active transportation, or to avoid people driving while under the influence, or maybe a bit of both. But it's one way to encourage public transportation, I guess. And preferably on commercial streets with, that have like restaurants, cinemas, theaters. We're making sure that the selling points are as far away as possible from schools, daycares, parks, where there's equipment for children and young people, community centers that are working with children and teens as well. And the plan is to have 100 stores across Quebec after 3 years, but it could increase if necessary. And each outlet will be about 2,000 square feet. There's not going to be any self-service, which reminds me of my days when I was 16 and went to the LCBO to get my Mickey of vodka for the school dance. So, 16. I was never served, actually. I always looked too young. I think the drinking age was actually 19 then. So like I said, there won't be any self-serve. You have to go to a counter and get it. So these were some of the things. I don't have a huge presentation because, like I said, we're waiting for Quebec and we're waiting for the feds to get more information from them in terms of how this is going to play out. But I would say the main thing for us is that it will be public health education. We'll be focusing on that. And also getting the resources that we need to properly educate the public and to train police officers and first responders and so on. So I don't want to take up any more time because it's lunchtime and it's spread out there, and I'm told there are no edibles, even though this is sponsored by Aurora. So anyway, enjoy your lunch, and we can talk over there. Is there another speaker? Oh, I'm sorry. There's another speaker. Okay, thank you very much.